Metal Gear Solid is not just a video game. It's a cultural landmark that defied the boundaries of digital entertainment. Under Hideo Kojima's audacious vision, the title transcended pixels to become a dense and unforgettable cinematic experience. Immersed in a melancholic atmosphere charged with political tension, the game transports the player to the icy corridors of Shadow Moses. There, the narrative comes to life through a cast of eccentric characters, from the enigmatic Revolver Ocelot to the tragic Psycho Mantis, whose motivations blur the lines between hero and villain. What truly elevates this work is its complex plot, which questions the nature of destiny, genetics, and war. Kojima didn't just create stealth mechanics. He wove an exceptional story that forces the player to reflect long after putting down the controller, solidifying its place as one of the greatest narrative achievements in video game history. Beneath the icy waters of Alaska, the silence is broken only by the sound of the SDV cutting through the chains. Inside the vehicle, Solid Snake, former Foxhound operative, prepares for a mission that seems like a ghost from the past. Over the radio, Colonel Roy Campbell dictates the urgency. Foxhound has rebelled, seized Shadow Moses Island, and the clock is ticking down to 24 hours until a nuclear attack. Liquid Snake, the terrorist leader, makes surreal demands: $1 billion and the remains of the legendary Big Boss. Snake emerges at the facility's docks. The cold is biting. His first objective is a silent infiltration to rescue two crucial hostages, Donald Anderson, the director of DARPA, and Kenneth Baker, the president of ArmsTech. But the mission has a bigger target: to prevent the activation of Metal Gear Rex, a bipedal weapon capable of launching undetectable nuclear warheads. As he ascends the cargo elevator to the helipad, Snake spots a familiar figure under the snow. Liquid Snake takes off in a Hind D. The sight of the Soviet combat helicopter immediately raises suspicions in the colonel. Could the Russians be supporting this revolt? With no time for speculation, Snake crawls through a ventilation duct, the only safe way into the base. He is interrupted by a radio call. Master Miller, his former mentor, is in line to provide tactical support. As he advances through the cold metal of the ducts, Snake observes, through a grate, a woman detained in a cell. Shortly after, his eyes fix on the target. He has located the cell where the DARPA chief is being held prisoner. The mission has officially begun. While tracking down the DARPA chief, Solid Snake receives alarming news. The terrorists need 2 detonation codes to arm Metal Gear Rex, and his has already been extracted. The remaining code is with Kenneth Baker, president of ArmsTech. Anderson reveals that the only way to abort the launch is through the PAL system, using 3 keycards. However, in a moment of inexplicable tension, the chief suffers a fatal heart attack and dies in front of Snake. Disturbed, Snake reports the death to Colonel Campbell, sensing that his commander is withholding crucial information about the nature of the mission. Sounds of combat echo outside the cell, warning of imminent danger. Upon exiting, Snake is immediately overpowered by an unknown soldier. However, the standoff is interrupted by an ambush of genome soldiers, forcing the 2 adversaries into an unlikely alliance to survive the shootout. With the threat eliminated, the mysterious soldier flees to the elevator, leaving Snake to question reality after glimpsing a sinister figure before the doors close. Snake locates the president of ArmsTech on the lower level of the base, but the scene is critical. Baker is tied to a pillar surrounded by C4 wires. Before he can intervene, Snake is challenged by Revolver Ocelot to a pistol duel. The confrontation is suddenly interrupted by an invisible cyber ninja who appears out of nowhere. With a precise sword strike, the ninja severs Ocelot's right arm and cuts the explosive wires. In shock and agony, Ocelot flees, followed by the ninja, who enters a state of psychotic rage, leaving Snake alone with a terrified Baker amidst the wreckage. After the chaos, Kenneth Baker reveals that the PAL system's cancellation cards were given to the soldier Snake encountered in the cells. He provides the technical data for Rex, a clue to discovering the young woman's codec frequency and the whereabouts of the chief scientist, Dr. Hal Emmerich. Baker entrusts Snake with an optical disc containing the project files, imploring him to prevent the launch. When questioned about Ninja, Baker reveals it to be a dirty, secret Foxhound project, but before he can say more, he suffers the same fatal heart attack that killed Anderson. Navigating through the shadows, Snake makes contact with the soldier, identifying her as Meryl Silverberg, the colonel's niece. After a tense exchange, Meryl unlocks the hangar's cargo door, allowing Snake to proceed north. However, as he crosses the door, his codec echoes with a transmission from a mysterious informant, Deep Throat, warning of Claymore mines and an imminent ambush. Seconds later, Snake finds himself face-to-face with a colossal tank commanded by Vulcan Raven. After an explosive battle against the armored unit, Snake emerges victorious, resuming his march determined to find Dr. Emmerich. Upon arriving at Dr. Hal Emmerich's office, Snake witnessed the reunion being violently interrupted by the cyber ninja. Amidst the frenzy of blades and metal, a shock of reality, beneath the biomechanical carapace, Snake recognized a ghost from Zanzibar land. It was an old ally he believed he had killed years before. Defeated and in mental agony, the ninja fled, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a terrified scientist. Emerging from the closet where he had been hiding, Dr. Emmerich revealed his true self, a man driven by his childhood passion for anime and mecha, who conceived Metal Gear Rex as a defensive system, never as a nuclear weapon. "Call me Otacon," he requested. After being reassured by Snake, the scientist issued a warning. If the PAL card system failed, the physical destruction of Rex would be the only option. Snake reunited with Meryl, but hopes for a quick solution vanished when they realized they only had one of the 3 necessary cards. The path to the communication towers was blocked by the terrifying presence of Psycho Mantis. In a display of absolute mental power, Mantis enslaved Meryl's will, forcing Snake to knock her out to save her. The battle defied sanity, ending with Mantis's defeat, who left behind a sinister prophecy about their tragic fate. The final advance was interrupted by the lethal precision of Sniper Wolf. In an act of strategic cruelty, she took down Meryl in open field, using her as bait. With no alternatives, Snake retreated to retrieve a PSG-1 rifle. Although he won the precision duel, the victory was a trap. Surrounded by Wolf and the Genome soldiers, Snake was eventually captured, finally falling into the enemy's hands. Captured and subjected to Revolver Ocelot's torture, Snake resists to the limit, knowing that any weakness would seal Meryl's fate. After confiscating Baker's data, Ocelot throws him into a cell where the hero is confronted with the corpse of the DARPA chief in an advanced state of decomposition, suggesting that the death had occurred days ago. Escape seemed impossible until Otacon's stealthy intervention. Protected by his optical camouflage, the scientist hands Snake a handkerchief and a bottle of ketchup. Snake uses the sauce to simulate a fatal hemorrhage. Upon opening the cell to check Snake's body, the guard is quickly neutralized. Once free, Snake recovers his equipment and advances determinedly towards the communication towers. Snake frantically runs to the top of the first tower, only to be greeted by the roar of the Hind D, piloted by Liquid Snake. In a calculated move, Liquid destroys the bridge connecting to the second tower, cutting off any conventional escape route. With no way out, Snake uses a rappel rope found on site to launch himself across the abyss of the tower, descending under a hail of bullets until he reaches a lower bridge. On his way to the top of the second tower, he crosses paths with Otacon again. While the scientist stays behind to repair the elevator and secure an evacuation route, Snake proceeds alone to the roof, preparing for the duel against the combat helicopter. Upon reaching the summit, Snake engages in a deadly duel against Liquid. During the confrontation, Liquid refers to Snake as brother. Faced with Snake's confusion, Liquid suggests Snake to investigate Big Boss's past for an explanation. Focused, Snake uses Stinger missiles to shoot down the aircraft and continues his infiltration, leaving the rooftop behind. Once outside the tower, Snake and Sniper Wolf face off in a final duel of patience and precision. On the vast white field, the silence is broken with the last shot that finally brings her down. As blood stains the snow, she reveals her past and how Big Boss gave her purpose and salvation. Otacon emerges from the mist, confessing his love for her. Gravely wounded, Wolf begs Snake for one last act of freedom. In an act of mercy, Snake ends her suffering under Otacon's tears. The path to the Metal Gear Rex hangar was forged in ice and blood. In the heart of those glacial temperatures, Solid Snake once again found himself face to face with the imposing Vulcan Raven. The roar of his Gatling gun echoed like thunder, transforming the scene into a labyrinth of metal and bullets. It was a brutal challenge, a test of pure endurance, but Snake's perseverance prevailed over the shaman's brute force. On the verge of death, Raven offered not only a last breath, but a disturbing truth. The man Snake had found in the cell, the one he believed to be the director of DARPA, was an imposter. It was Decoy Octopus, the master of disguise. Before Snake could process the revelation, Raven's body disappeared in a macabre way, devoured by his own flock of crows, leaving only the echo of his words. Upon reaching the hangar's control room, the silence was broken by the codec. Otacon, coming directly from the computer lab, brought disheartening news. Despite all his efforts to hack into the system, Kenneth Baker's PAL key file was still missing. However, Snake's time to investigate ran out when the voices of Liquid and Ocelot filled the air. Hidden, Snake overheard Liquid's master plan to use Metal Gear Rex to trigger a nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia. Allied with Colonel Sergei Gerlikovich and his mercenaries, Liquid intended to erect the true outer heaven there, in Shadow Moses, Big Boss's dystopian dream realized. Suddenly, Otacon came into contact again with a crucial discovery. The documents revealed the secret of the PAL key. It was forged from a shape memory metal alloy. To deactivate Rex, Snake wouldn't need 3 keys, but rather to insert the same key 3 times, altering its structure through exposure to ambient temperature, extreme cold, and intense heat. But victory was far from guaranteed. While Snake held the fate of the world in his hands, a precise shot from Revolver Ocelot, who was watching from the shadows, violently ripped the PAL key from his hand, throwing it into the unknown. The silence in the control room didn't bring the peace of deactivation, but the mechanical roar of awakening. As the Metal Gear Rex systems came to life, Snake's codec rang. On the other end, Miller's voice was no longer that of a mentor, but overflowed with sinister triumph. The revelation was a gut punch. The real Master Miller had been dead for 3 days. The voice that guided Snake through Shadow Moses actually belonged to Liquid Snake. Horror set in as the mask fell. Snake hadn't prevented the launch. He had enabled it. The terrorists never possessed the DARPA chief's code. Instead, Decoy Octopus assumed the identity of Donald Anderson, manipulating Snake into using the PAL keys. The plan would have been flawless, if not for the fact that Octopus succumbed to the Fox Die virus, which identified him as a target through the chief's infused blood. Trapped in the room as a deadly gas filled the air, Snake narrowly escaped with Otacon's remote assistance. Upon confronting his brother, the full conspiracy emerged from the shadows. The Pentagon had used Snake as a biological vector for the Fox Die virus. The goal was to silently eliminate Foxhound, allowing for the intact recovery of the Genome Soldiers and Metal Gear. Facing Rex, Liquid revealed the truth about their lineage. They were byproducts of the secret Les Enfants Terribles project, created from Big Boss's DNA. Consumed by hatred, Liquid explained that Snake had inherited the dominant genes, while he had been relegated to the recessive ones. For Liquid, defeating his brother and using his father's biological remains was not just revenge. It was the only way to finally overcome the legacy of the legendary soldier. As Liquid climbs into the cockpit of Metal Gear Rex, Snake is backed into a corner with only one option: total destruction. Despite Otacon providing intel on Rex's structural flaws, the sheer power of the machine proves overwhelming. Just as hope fades, the cyborg ninja leaps from the shadows, slicing through the darkness to cripple the Titan. In a final quiet moment of cover, the warrior reveals his true identity: Gray Fox, Snake's old comrade Frank Jaeger. Fox launches a desperate final assault, sacrificing his body to shatter Rex's radome. Though he is crushed beneath the machine's weight, his sacrifice creates the opening Snake needs. Armed with his Stinger missiles, Snake delivers the killing blow. The resulting explosion is massive, consuming the hangar and knocking Snake into unconsciousness. Snake regains consciousness atop the twisted wreckage of the fallen mecha. His vision clears to find his hands bound tight, and standing over him is Liquid Snake. Beside Liquid is Meryl Silverberg, motionless and pale. With a cold indifference, Liquid admits he isn't sure if she's still breathing. He offers a sadistic bargain. He will release her only after they settle their business. A final confrontation between brothers. As the final showdown approaches, Snake's codec rings. On the other end, Colonel Campbell's voice carries an unprecedented weight. He reveals a grim truth: Naomi's manipulation of the Fox Die virus and the destruction of Rex have put the Pentagon on high alert. A nuclear strike has already been authorized to incinerate the island and erase all evidence. In an act of insubordination, Campbell confesses that he is trying to delay the launch to give Snake and Meryl a chance to escape. The most bitter revelation, however, is personal. The Pentagon strategically assigned Meryl to Shadow Moses, using her as a pawn to blackmail the Colonel. Campbell was forced to withhold vital information and lie to his best soldier to ensure his niece's life. With a choked voice, he apologizes to Snake, admitting that buying time is the only way to make up for his disloyalty. Without weapons or uniforms, the two brothers face off in a brutal fistfight atop the metal hull of the Rex. Liquid's hatred and Snake's resilience clash with each blow, until, with a final impact, Liquid loses his balance and plummets into the depths of the hangar. Ignoring his exhaustion, Snake runs to Meryl. To his immense relief, she regains consciousness, weak but alive. However, there is no time for celebrations. Snake activates codec for one last urgent conversation with Otacon. He orders the scientist to flee immediately, warning him that the Pentagon has already sent bombers to wipe Shadow Moses off the map. Snake and Meryl surged forward along the supply route, hopping into an abandoned military jeep. As Meryl took the wheel with determination, Snake positioned himself at the rear-mounted machine gun. Together, they broke through barricades and neutralized the last Genome soldiers in a trail of smoke and lead. Freedom finally seemed within reach, but the headlights of a second jeep suddenly appeared in the mirrors. It was Liquid Snake. Refusing to die, Liquid initiated a frantic chase through the tunnel. Metal twisted and sparks flew as the two vehicles exchanged gunfire at high speed. Outside the tunnel, the inevitable happened. A brutal collision flipped the jeeps, leaving Snake and Meryl trapped beneath the twisted wreckage. Wounded and bloodied, Liquid emerged from the wreckage and slowly walked toward Snake, weapon in hand. Just as he prepared for the final blow, fate intervened. Liquid was struck by a violent spasm. The Fox Die virus had finally reached him. Before his brother's astonished gaze, Liquid succumbed to a sudden heart attack at his feet. Standing there, before Liquid's corpse, Snake was overcome by a grim certainty. He would be next on the virus's list. Snake stared at the gray sky of Shadow Moses, his lungs burning with the frigid air as he awaited the final flash. The silence, however, was absolute. The stealth bombers, which should have already reduced the base to ashes, did not appear. The radio rang one last time. It was Colonel Campbell. In a voice that mixed exhaustion and profound relief, he informed him that the attack order had been revoked. The immediate danger had passed. The sky, once a death sentence, remained empty. Before leaving, Snake assured the colonel that he would send a rescue team to Otacon, refusing to leave his ally behind. He then requested one last call with Naomi Hunter. With a voice bathed in unprecedented serenity, Naomi offered him the ultimate gift, freedom. She revealed that the time he had left did not matter. What mattered was how he chose to use it. The message was clear. Snake should not live as a slave to his genetic code or the fear of Fox Die, but rather embrace life while it lasted. Leaving behind the ashes of Shadow Moses, Snake and Meryl found a snowmobile hidden beneath the white blanket. Together, they sped toward the horizon, distancing themselves from the conspiracy and the twisted metal. As they lost themselves in the wild Alaskan wilderness, the icy isolation no longer felt like a prison, but the beginning of a long-promised freedom. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. I hope to see you in my next one. A sweet kiss.